Hey, everybody. It is Friday, May 10th. We've made it through another week. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, a early happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you, Moshe. I appreciate it. I still don't feel like it's a holiday for me, despite the fact that I have two kids.
It's for your mom. You still think about your mom.
Exactly. I'm still focused on my mom, my mother-in-law. We're hosting. So But so thank you for giving me my first happy Mother's Day.
It's actually funny you bring that up. As I was talking in recent weeks with Alex, my wife, about it, I was like, so what's the plan for Mother's Day? She's like, well, I was thinking about doing X, Y, and Z with my mom. And I'm like, no. This is your first Mother's Day
your mom.
with our child. She's like, oh man. I'm like, yes, now you get to be appreciated and celebrated on Mother's Day. So I guess it's a transition. Jill, I was also Googling around. I was like, well, what other days are being celebrated in the coming days? And it turns out that tomorrow, I don't know who made this a day, but I like the idea of it. May 11th is National Eat What You Want Day, just the day before Mother's Day.
AKA every day in my house, but I'm here for it.
Jill, at the top of the newsletter today, we have some stats on Mother's Day. 3 out of 4 of you are buying flowers for your mom or the woman in your life.
Flowers that are pretty for like a day and then are just more work. Wah, wah.
All right. So 3/4 of you will get flowers. 3/4 of you will give a card. 60% of you will involve a meal as part of the celebration. On average, people will be spending $254 to celebrate. Across the U.S., $33 billion will be spent on Mother's Day.
All right. Well, in all seriousness, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there, the grandmothers, everyone trying to become a mother, the dads who are playing mom and dad. A lot to celebrate. And for everyone who finds it to be a difficult day for various reasons, wishing you an easy day as well.
Yeah, we're thinking about you as well. We have a new pod out over on the Premium Pod with the founder of Mother Untitled, an Instagram account that focuses on stay-at-home moms taking a pause from work. But we get into some of the issues facing moms in America. So check out that edition with Neha Rush, my conversation with her, over on the Premium Pod. If you're not already a member, you can join over at mo.news/premium. We do have a 2-week free trial going right now.
And if anyone's in need of a last-minute Mother's Day gift, give the gift of news.
Give the gift of Mo News Premium, folks. You can do that. We also have merch. So get the special someone in your life a hat, a fleece.
Okay, so don't kill me, Moshe. Don't get that for your moms.
Worst sales pitch ever. What if your mom is really into Mo News, Jill? Don't discount how meaningful the merch can be.
I think it's a wonderful thing. Like, I live for the merch. I don't know if I'd want it for Mother's Day.
Oh, I got to call Michael immediately.
Michael, cancel the order.
Cancel the order big time. We thought Jill would be into it.
Send the mug back. Okay.
All right, fine. We'll try again for Father's Day, everybody.
Okay, now to some news. Here are the headlines. Some reaction after President Biden says that the U.S. will not be supplying Israel with weapons if it attacks Rafah. Some changes could be coming that would make it tougher for migrants to claim asylum in the United States. As for pets, the CDC announcing some strict rules for traveling to the United States with your dog. To the economy, Americans are shopping less, but they are still spending money on one thing, and it definitely looks good on social media. We'll tell you what it is. The class of 2024 is about to embark on the real world. So where are they going, and what are they looking to do? We've got the results of a new survey. If they are headed to New York City, it's going to be expensive. Manhattan apartment rents have climbed to their highest levels ever for the month of April. And Dumbphones are making a comeback. We'll tell you why. Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating. All right, let's start with the Middle East and some strong reaction to President Biden's announcement Wednesday that he will temporarily withhold certain bombs and weapons from Israel if it invades the Gaza city of Rafah. It is the first time since the Hamas attack on October 7th that he has threatened to withhold any U.S. military aid. and it is certainly the most direct warning that he has given to Israel since the war started. Quickly, a bit of what Biden had to say.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding Thursday saying that if Israel needs to stand alone, it will stand alone. Israeli officials add that they think that they have enough weapons for an operation in Rafah, where they believe the remaining Hamas forces and weapons are located, along with the hostages. Here in the U.S., there has been a chorus of reaction from some Democrats supporting Biden to Republicans and some pro-Israel Democrats criticizing the move. Former President Trump chimed in as well ahead of court on Thursday, saying that what Biden is doing to Israel is disgraceful.
If any Jewish person voted for Joe Biden, they should be ashamed of themselves. He's totally abandoned Israel, and nobody can believe it.
And it isn't the first time that Trump has specifically called out Jewish voters who support Biden. He says that he was actually the best president for Israel in history. And Moshe, we posted that clip of Trump on our Instagram account. And based on the reactions, there are a lot of people who agree with him and a lot who don't. Many who say that just his comment is actually kind of anti-Semitic, indicating that Jews have this dual loyalty. Okay, back to the city of Rafah. For months, the Biden administration has said that it opposes a major Israeli ground operation in Rafah if it didn't include a plan to protect civilians. There are more than 1 million Palestinians that have taken refuge there, many of whom have been displaced from other parts of the Gaza Strip. So far, Israel has captured the Rafah border crossing, but has not conducted a full-scale operation into the center of the city. So Moshe, tons of questions here. How big of a deal is this? What does it mean for U.S.-Israel relations and also the war in general?
Yeah, so there's a lot here that we're seeing in front of the cameras. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. The relationship between Israel and the U.S. goes back to the founding of Israel in 1948. And there's still a very deep relationship there. A lot of coordination that's happening behind the scenes between the defense ministry, the Pentagon, etc. Now, keep in mind, you did have that huge aid package that was passed last month, $15 billion. The vast majority of the military aid still going through. But here we are, 7 months into the war. The Israelis have invaded most of Gaza. They've destroyed Hamas capabilities in about 90% of Gaza, though Hamas has gradually gotten back into some of those areas as the Israelis have retreated back, and now stands Rafah, which is the city that sits on the Egyptian border. It's been known as a heavy smuggling center by which Hamas brings in a lot of weapons and various things through tunnels under the border. The Israelis haven't had control of it since 2005, since Israel pulled out and ended the occupation of the Gaza Strip 20 years ago. So for the Israelis, they feel that 20 years later, they need to go in there and destroy a lot of the infrastructure that Hamas has built, that they can't leave it there. Now, by the way, one of the reasons why the Egyptians have had their own blockade on Gaza and Hamas is because of that smuggling that's taken place through Rafah. So if you talk to some Egyptian leaders behind the scenes, they won't say it publicly because of where the public is. They sort of want Israel to do this because this will end some of the smuggling and issues that they face on their border there.
Well, it is interesting because the border between Gaza and Egypt, the wall there is actually much higher and much more fortified than the wall between Gaza and Israel, which has led some Israelis and people who are pro-Israel to say, you know, why is nobody protesting against Egypt and saying that Egypt is putting Palestinians in an outdoor prison?
The Middle East is a very complicated place. At the end of the day, though, the Israelis have been the ones that have effectively controlled most of the border and been calling the shots when it comes to Gaza now, going back a number of years, at least from the outside. Of course, Hamas has been running it on the inside. So bottom line is the Israelis believe they have to go into Rafah to sort of, quote unquote, finish the job here on Hamas. Now, the U.S. has been saying for a while, enough. Like, we gave you we gave you clearance here in the fall, in the winter to do what needs to be done. You're now more than 7 months in. I need this to end, Joe Biden is saying. Why? Well, he's facing a lot of international pressure, but also a lot of domestic pressure as he faces an election here. And their hope was that this war would be behind them so he could focus on issues here, and this wouldn't serve as a distraction politically going into the fall. So Biden's been trying to do a lot of things behind the scenes here to try to be like, okay, end this, end this. And part of it, according to the Wall Street Journal, included withholding certain weapons from the $15 billion aid package. So again, the vast majority going through, but Biden has made a decision to withhold about 3,000 bombs, 2,000-pound bombs and 500-pound bombs. Again, about 3,000 bombs that were part of this overall aid package. He says that he will continue to support all the weapons going to Israel as far as anti-aircraft weapons, Iron Dome. Remember, the U.S. was key in helping to defend Israel as Iran attacked last month. But the White House has been behind the scenes trying to put pressure on them, and it has broken out into the open because effectively their pressure campaign was leaked by the Israelis, then confirmed. The leaks were confirmed by other U.S. officials. So now it's out in the open that they were withholding the weapons here. They see this as a lever against Netanyahu, Biden, and Bibi. 20 years plus, they haven't liked each other. And that has been an issue throughout this war. It's only gotten worse, this personal relationship, throughout the war. And so now you have Biden saying, end this. So the White House will say it's partially for national security grounds. We haven't gotten a good plan from the Israelis as far as Rafah, so we're not letting them do it. And of course, it's the politics of it. On the Israeli side, same thing. They have a national security argument. They got to keep putting pressure on Hamas. They got to go into Rafah to finish their terror infrastructure. There's also political benefits here for Netanyahu to go in because his right flank feels that he's getting too soft, that he's trying to compromise here against Hamas, that after this whole war, Hamas will still exist. Hamas potentially still could be in charge of Gaza. So he faces pressure from his own coalition government, from folks to the right of him. So what benefits him? Well, pushing back on Biden, being like, well, screw you, I'll do this on my own. So you see here domestic politics at play in both countries, national security politics at play in both countries. And ultimately here, again, in the context of things, the vast majority of aid goes through. But in this case, specific bombs are being withheld. Will this win Biden points with the left? We haven't mentioned. Some people on the left who've been criticizing him say too little too late, Joe Biden. You've been too supportive of Israel, so you're not winning my vote anyway. Then you got folks sort of in the middle of the Democratic coalition who say, I sort of appreciate him pushing back. Then you have a whole bunch of folks in the center, including a number of Jewish voters and Republicans and moderates and independents who say, well, this is an ally that we've promised to support, that Congress approved the aid for, and you're withholding the aid. So that ain't cool either. So you did see a whole slew of statements. You saw even some people go as far, Jill, as Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, say that maybe we should go ahead and impeach Joe Biden over this. Why? Well, in the lead up to 2020, remember a certain president called a foreign leader and withheld military aid that was approved by Congress. That leader, Donald Trump, the other leader, Zelensky. And effectively, Trump was saying, hey, Zelensky, I'll give you all the military aid you're promised if you open up an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden. Politics at play. The argument from Republicans here, now Democrats push back on this, is, well, isn't that sort of what Joe Biden is doing here? He's got domestic politics at play, so he's withholding congressionally approved military aid. Now, the White House says there's no comparison here. The Biden White House says that. They say at the end of the day, this is a national security argument. This is not a politics thing. Republicans beg to differ. And so they say you set a precedent that you could impeach Donald Trump the first time over something like this. So I don't know how serious that is. Remember, Democrats control the Senate, but I don't see it gaining traction yet. But that's among the reaction, a bit of the reaction that you've seen. Joe Biden in a spot here where he's taking verbal incoming from a variety of sides and trying to find some sort of middle ground here and some approval.
Moshe, I saw a premium member ask you on Thursday what this means for a potential ceasefire hostage deal. And you do have a lot of politicians, especially Republicans, who say that it is making it a lot harder to reach a deal because what is Hamas's incentive for negotiating when it looks like the U.S. is really putting the pressure on Israel to end this war without really finishing it? And to that end, I noticed that one of the more vocal hostage families, that of 23-year-old American Hirsch Goldberg, writing on social media that during his interview, Biden, they say, spent time threatening to cut off military aid to Israel, but didn't even make a single mention of the hostages kidnapped violently by Hamas, not even the Americans, with a list of their names. Now, the U.S. is working under the assumption that there are 5 Americans still in Gaza that are unaccounted for. Gersh's family writing, quote, "Your silence on their plight was deafening, and it sent a message to Hamas that our hostages are not a priority." Moshe, I heard you talk about that on the premium feed.
Yeah, so the assessment here is that as Hamas watches this fight, this open fight between the U.S. and Israel, this tension here, that they feel no need to concede anything, that ultimately they see the U.S. putting pressure on Israel here. They can sit back. And so while you've seen these ceasefire talks go on for months and months, and you saw most recently U.S. officials say, Hamas, come to the table, that you have a great deal on the table here. Remember earlier in the week, we began with Hamas agreeing to its own deal that doesn't commit to even releasing all the hostages or even all the living hostages. The Israelis saying that there's more to be desired by Hamas. Hamas now sees this saying, well, the U.S. is telling the Israelis to shut this down. We just need to sit back and watch this. And so ultimately, for the people asking the question, what does this mean to a hostage deal or ceasefire deal? If you're working under the assumption that Hamas needs to make more concessions here and actually agree to release all the hostages, then this doesn't help that, right? Because ultimately, they, again, see no reason to make any concessions as they watch the allies fight each other here. And so talks continue in Cairo. The two sides still have a divide there. The Israeli government, a number of officials there working under the assumption that they need to go into Rafah to put pressure on Hamas. Other Israeli officials say this will do nothing for us. Let's just cut a deal at this point. But of course, there's politics at play in Israel as well. So a very complex web here. Again, the vast majority of the weapons continue to flow. Some weapons being held here. Politics at play. National security at play here as we now head into the middle of the 7th month of the war here. And we watch the humanitarian issues unfold in Gaza, though it appears the pier that the U.S. Built for about $300 million is about ready to go now. So that should help alleviate some of the flow of aid coming in. The hostages remain 200 days plus there. And the Israelis threatened to basically take out the last major city where they see about 4 of the initially 24 Hamas battalions remaining. They believe they've taken out the vast majority of them at this point.
And I know we have so much other news to get to, but one other point I wanted to mention, in your interview with Barak Ravid, who is a Middle Eastern correspondent for Axios, he has tons of great sources, both in Israel and Washington. He had pointed out weeks ago that the fighting in Gaza had primarily been over for a while. And it is just kind of Rafah that has been standing in the way of this being done. So you do have to wonder strategically from the Biden administration, if Israel is going to go into Rafah regardless, would it have been better for them to have just done it, months ago? And then this war could potentially have been over with more of a buffer between now and the election.
Yeah, I mean, one argues that some of the micromanaging you see from the White House, both in Ukraine and Israel, has not been effective. And by that, I mean that you've seen the White House, you've seen Joe Biden specifically say, to Ukraine, you get this weapon, but not this weapon. You get this weapon, but not this weapon. We don't trust you with this weapon. That could open up a larger war with Russia. In the same case, see that with Israel, where he's like, I'll send you these weapons, but not the 2,000-pound bombs, the 500-pound bombs. And slow walking these wars, in some cases, only prolongs the conflict. You see some Republicans make the argument that the only reason why, Japan became one of the most pacifist cultures on earth and Germany, one of the most open-minded, is because you completely eliminated those previous regimes during World War II with completely different cultures. And that not finishing the job, so to speak, in taking out those regimes and changing the culture only prolongs this conflict and creates the situation where another war inevitably will happen between Israel and Hamas and in Gaza in the coming year. So that's the argument that you hear against the Biden tactic, which is give them everything they need to finish this and then move on from it, as opposed to this sort of drip drop where things continue over time. So I'm just trying to lay out all the various arguments. There's pushback on each of them, but it's foreign policy is complicated. National security politics are complicated. There's domestic issues here. There's foreign policy. There's personalities at play here in both places. And then you have all the international people involved. It's no accident this week that the King of Jordan was at the White House meeting with Biden in the Oval Office as he made this announcement this week. And Jordan in particular wants this war to end. Why? Jordan's population is like 75, 80% Palestinian. The Queen of Jordan is Palestinian. And so they have a very complex relationship because they have an incredible security and intelligence partnership with Israel. But at the same time, they have a very large Palestinian population in certain views that they express publicly versus privately. So there are people, as I was saying, that are sort of in the Arab world, Arab leaders, Saudi Arabia, others behind closed doors will say, finish off Hamas. They are a pain for all of us affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran. But publicly, we cannot say that because our publics are very concerned about the humanitarian issues, etc. So a very complex web. Keep in mind, there are things that we don't know that are going on behind the scenes versus in front of the camera. And Jill, next week is another week, and we will watch as, the next part of the story is written.
Time now for the speed read from NPR. The Biden administration proposed a new rule Thursday aimed at speeding up how quickly the U.S. can kick out asylum seekers who pose potential security risks. It potentially signals broader actions by President Biden later this year and a bigger crackdown at the U.S.-Mexico border. The incremental change would apply to people viewed as unlikely to be eligible for asylum because they pose national security risks. Until now, though, even if they pose a danger, they would be able to stay in the United States for months or years as they await a judge's ruling. This proposal, though, would mean that they could be deported within days, if not hours, after crossing the border.
So the current review process, as you mentioned, can take years. So this is sort of a no-brainer here for Biden as he tries to clear up the rules and he faces backlash going into the election here for a lax border policy. This proposal, though, does still need to go through a formal comment period, so it doesn't go into effect immediately, but could happen in the coming months here. It is just one of the incremental shifts we've seen at the border as it's become clear that immigration continues to remain, if not the top issue, a top three issue for many American voters. Polls show that voters are concerned about the large number of migrants who've come across the border. They disapprove of the way Biden has handled the issue. That includes people in his own party. And it comes, though, as we have told you, that in recent months, we have seen the number of crossings decrease. We talked about that in the newsletter last week, I think in the Friday edition. So check that out over at mo.news. It's still at a higher level than it was during Trump, but it is decreasing. Some of the tactics Biden is using here were Trump-era tactics, incidentally, that he criticized back when he was a candidate, Joe Biden. But as the numbers have increased here, he's taken on some of the strategies from the Trump administration. And one of the key issues that they're trying to clear up here is just that there's not enough asylum judges. And so many people who come across the border, they claim asylum. They say, I can't go back to my home country. I'm facing murder. I'm facing jail. I'm facing threats to my family because I'm a minority or I'm X, Y, or Z. And all we do in the meantime is say, okay, like we need to process that. We need to hear that at a formal hearing. You can go to Wisconsin now. You can go to Minnesota now. Here's a piece of paper. Show up in court next September or a year from September. And so they need to clear this up because the backlog here is incredibly large. And so it appears here this is one move, and it's something we'll continue to watch as the election nears.
To the economy from CNN Money, consumers may be fed up with high prices at the store, but they are still willing to splurge on travel. Disney's parks and experiences revenue grew about 11% during the second quarter from the year prior. The company saying that while attendance isn't at the elevated levels that we're seeing following the end of pandemic restrictions, it still rose at its U.S. and Hong Kong Disneyland resorts. Disney is planning to bring an Avatar-themed experience to Disneyland in California and is expanding its Magic Kingdom in Florida as part of a $60 billion investment in parks, cruises, and experiences over the next decade. And other key players in the travel industry have reported a similar trend.
So we have seen this trend line where Americans are pulling back from retailers as inflation prices outpace wage growth. And they have even become, and more Americans have become frugal when it comes to some experience-based spending, like dining out, opting instead to eat at home. But travel demand here remains robust. Jill, no matter what company you talk to, Amex is seeing it, Marriott is seeing it, United is seeing it, Delta Airlines is seeing it, the Delta CEO telling investors that they've seen a record spring and summer travel season, and that travel continues to remain a top purchase priority for people. Consider this still the fallout, the hangover from the pandemic, when we were stuck indoors, that people are still trying to get to certain places. And you're seeing insane prices, Jill. I mean, I've seen a lot of articles recently about with prices, so high in the places like Italy, Spain, Paris, some of the go-tos for people, some of the most traveled to places in the world. They're like, here are some other places to check out if you're still intent on traveling, because literally, I was talking to some travel experts who were like, if you own a hotel or Airbnb or whatever in Italy, it's like name your price. People are just like, can I get this amount? Let's see. And they're like, oh my God, that got booked in a day. I should raise it by several thousand more, because just the demand is so incredible right now. And it continues to be so, even though the world's been open again. I guess this is probably the third summer that the world's been open again.
Well, I never understood the term revenge travel, and was like, who are you getting revenge on?
Yeah.
COVID? Virus?
Yes.
So people are still vengeful.
That little red
apparently.
logo, the artist rendering of COVID that we had to stare at on
the 3D
with the little spikes. That's what we need revenge on. It looks like we're still doing it.
All right. Well, sticking with money, this story from Axios. More of this year's graduating college seniors are seeking the security of a government job, and fewer are applying to risky seeming tech jobs. This is according to Handshake, a campus recruitment website. By the way, Axios has called the class of 2024 the bummer generation. And that is because of how COVID-19 warped these seminal events of these students' lives. So they're saying that these students in the bummer generation at this point just want stability and a comfortable income.
So there's boomers and there's bummers. Is that what Axios is they're trying to make bummer happen?
I'd love to hear from somebody who's in this generation. How do they feel about that? Do they feel like they're the bummer generation?
Talk to your college student. How do you feel about being dubbed the bummer generation?
Okay, so what does the bummer generation want? Job security, work-life balance, and the ability to live near family and friends. That is at the top of considerations for the class of 2024. 76% of this class says that stability is the number one factor they're considering. About 7% of the applications submitted on Handshake from this year's graduating class were for government roles. That's actually up from about 5% last year. 21% of applications were for tech jobs. That's down from 23% last year. But we should note a lot of young people who are looking to work for the government are actually going for tech jobs in the government. So like for the IRS or the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, so the numbers there, 3 times as many college grads still applying to tech jobs versus government jobs, but trend lines, slightly less for tech, slightly more for government. So they're trying to read between the lines here. Certainly the government has been trying to create competitive wages. Jill, I remember when I was a college grad 20 years ago applying to government jobs, and just the bureaucratic red tape and security clearances. Anyway, I ended up not working for the government because things were taking so long. So I hope they've cleared it, though, based on some of the people I've spoken to. Still a lot of bureaucracy. So that application might go through. It just might be a while before you get it.
Sure. It wasn't that time you went streaking through Washington, D.C., Moshe.
No, Jill. I watched Old School. I didn't reenact Old School. Remember, I was in college in the couple years after 9/11 in D.C., so security was very tight at that time. So we had to be careful. We had to be careful in the post 9/11 D.C. era.
It was also pre-smartphones. So if there's no evidence, it didn't happen.
You're right. Exactly. What are you talking about, Jill? We had Dumbphones, which we'll get to here in a second. Flip phones. Sticking with the graduating theme here, there's some new numbers out as to where the class of 2024 wants to go for work. New York City, the most popular destination for applications. About 9% of people applying to jobs in New York. Other cities seeing an increase here: Salt Lake City, Boise, as well as Texas City, Texas, which is right there next to Galveston, and Houston there. Some decreases in applications when it comes to Dallas, Seattle, Houston, Denver, and Atlanta. Again, as you mentioned, stability important, employer reputation, high starting salary, flexible schedule, hybrid work. It turns out, Jill, Gen Z, the bummer generation, just like the rest of us in terms of what they're looking for, it looks like.
And for all those graduates headed to New York City, get ready to pay up. From Bloomberg, Manhattan apartment rents rose last month to a new high for April, an increase that suggests another record-shattering summer yet to come. And finally, this story from Axios: breaking up with your smartphone is hard, but a growing dumb phone market is providing offline alternatives. The well-known negative effects of screens, things like loneliness, addiction, anxiety, depression, well, that has left many people eager to disconnect. So what is a dumb phone? It is a basic 90s-inspired cell phone without all of the apps that contribute to high screen times. So basically just texting and calling. Influencers and brands are getting in on the trend, with YouTube content creators sharing their experiences and recommendations. The New Yorker recently called dumb phones a burgeoning cottage industry. There's one company, Dumb Wireless. It was founded just in 2022 that offers dumb phones ranging from $50 to $300 from a variety of companies. And one of the founders says that the reason that they created this platform was because they struggle to unplug, saying everyone gets that creeping feeling that they cannot go on with the way they are doing things with their smartphone.
Yeah, but just to put things into context here, Dumb Wireless has sold a few hundred phones, it appears, so far each month, Jill. We're not talking about a massive shift, but certainly it's a conversation that people are having, especially when it comes to their kids and when it might be time to actually introduce a smartphone before high school or during high school, or do you begin with these quote unquote dumb phones? So you are starting to see flip phone sales from Nokia go up. So again, from a very low number, you're starting to see some in the hundreds or the thousands of people buying these phones. Though it is interesting, you mentioned the YouTube creators who, like, how are they creating all that YouTube content if they're, getting into dumb phones? I guess that means that the YouTube creators need to carry two phones with them, a smartphone and a dumb phone. I think
which feels pretty dumb, right?
I mean, unless like for certain times you just don't want to be constantly accessible to things and you don't trust yourself with certain apps. I certainly hear it from people who are like, I need to get my mo.news fix on the podcast because like I need to take breaks from my smartphone and I need to delete certain apps once in a while. Still, this speaks to the larger conversation we've been having about the dependency that's been created by these technologies, so that the apps have us addicted here. And so you see this pushback and this trend line. So we'll see how widespread this is. It appears a trickle is happening when it comes to this, and we'll see what comes in the coming quarters and years.
I do think that as a parent with a young kid, this could perhaps be the compromise or solution for at least those late elementary, middle school years when you need to get in touch with your kid, but you don't want them to get addicted to the screen.
Yep.
All right, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, what are you watching?
So, Jill, first of all, last week you mentioned Idea of You. My wife Alex had seen it too. She's like, you got to watch this movie with Anne Hathaway. I did, and I thought it was excellent. And it's gotten a lot of buzz. Did you end up watching it?
I did. I loved it. In fact, I started rewatching it because that's what I do in my house.
All right, so that's streaming over on Amazon Prime. And then we just watched the Unfrosted, the Pop-Tart movie with Jerry Seinfeld and a whole slew of comedians, which I thought was a fun watch over on Netflix. What are you watching?
Okay, so I'm going to a show, Moshe. My daughter is in a show this weekend, High School Musical. So I will be watching that. She has a little solo and a few lines, and she's been working really hard. So go, Alex. I'm really excited to see her and her friends.
Wishing Alex a lot of luck. Jill, I look forward to clips of Alex's performance. Well, if not on social media, just text it to me.
We'll see how it goes.
We'll see if she's ready for her global debut, global premiere. Jill, what are you reading this weekend?
A reminder, she is 5. So I am reading another light beach read from Jennifer Weiner. It's called Goodnight Nobody. It is kind of old. I finished that book, Bad Summer People, that I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago. And when I was in Florida, my in-laws have kind of like this clubhouse where they have, it's not a library, it's just like a book exchange where you could take a book or give a book. So I picked this book out. It's called, again, Goodnight Nobody. And it's about this woman who moves to the burbs, not going great for her. But a fellow mother winds up getting murdered.
Oh, no.
And she launches an unofficial investigation. So I could be a little snarky and down on the burbs. I have to say, from the first few chapters that I'm reading, I think this is almost like too snarky and miserable about the suburbs. They're actually fine. They're actually fine. But needless to say, I'm enjoying it so far.
I love it. An old school book exchange where you literally just pick the book up.
So I was in there and there were two other women who were looking for books. So I was like, what's the deal? Like, do I have to finish this book while I'm on vacation and give it back? And they're like, no, just keep it. Like, it's yours. Take
it to the burbs with you. Hopefully you don't get any nightmares.
Like one day, just drop another book off. But I think it was a great idea. And there were tons of books in there. Moshe, what are you reading?
So speaking of books, Bonnie Hammer, executive from NBC, has a new book out called 15 Lies Women Are Told at Work and the Truth We Need to Succeed. Very blunt advice from Hammer. Has been incredibly successful in her career. And so that book is out right now. We're actually hoping to get her on the podcast in the next week or two. And so there's a preview in the Wall Street Journal about how, among other things, follow your dreams is terrible career advice, she explains. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes, but very blunt and interesting advice from Bonnie Hammer.
I kind of love that. Scott Galloway actually says that too. He's like, who's ever telling you to follow their passion is either super rich or just out of touch. He said, just do what you're good at, and then you could do your passion on the weekend.
Right. And maybe if you're lucky, you can turn your passion into a full-time thing. But going into the workforce at 22 years old, no experience, basically she hammers these commencement speakers who are like, the commencement addresses were like, go follow your dreams. Like, no, you shouldn't be telling most 21-year-old and 22-year-olds to go follow their dreams. Like, they need to get a job and figure out the workforce. And then at some point they can begin to, anyway. So, and I'm sure there are people listening to this being like, Moshe and Jill, you guys are completely wrong about this. We should be telling them to pursue their dreams. Anyway, I'm just telling you this is one person's perspective, and I found it interesting.
Well, it sounds right up my alley. So tough love, Moshe. I look forward to reading it. Moshe, what are you eating?
So Alex, my wife, has made an incredible short rib recipe this week. So I'll direct all of you to her Instagram account at ALSALL, for details on how she did the short rib. It was great. Jill, what do you got?
All right, Moshe. So I want to give a shout out to Mia's Bakery. It's in your neck of the woods in Brooklyn.
Jill, it's like 3 blocks from me. We've ordered several cakes from there.
I'm very much not surprised, actually. I was going to send
Wait, did we not tell you about
cake.
Mia's Bakery?
No.
You discovered Mia's Bakery on your own?
Okay, first of all, you don't need to be so shocked, okay? Second of all, it was my sister-in-law.
Right.
They live right near you.
They live right next to us, yes.
So we were looking to get a cake for my parents for their anniversary, and my sister-in-law said, let's put a picture from when they got married on the cake. That's what Mia's Bakery is kind of known for. So she took one of their wedding pictures. They put it right on top of the cake. And it was a huge, huge hit. My daughter is still talking about it. I actually posted a picture on my Instagram feed because it was that cool. But I will do it again. And yeah, just a shout out to Mia's Bakery, because not only was it just an awesome visual, but the cake was delicious.
Yeah, Mia's Bakery right over there on Smith Street in Boerum Hill. Check it out.
One of these days, Moshe, I'm going to have something new that you've never
Mia's old news, Jill. Who hasn't been to Mia's in Brooklyn?
Wait, how do you know about
I've
Mia's?
heard about this place called Katz's Deli. What else you got for me, Jill?
I did teach everybody about Trader Joe's sprinkles. I get credit for that, right?
I'm not here to diminish the many new and different things you've brought to this podcast, but that was my genuine reaction to Mia's. 'Cause I was like, come on.
Black and white cookies. There's a new thing.
This is new thing.
All right. Anyway, thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Thank you, everyone, for spending your week with us. Again, happy Mother's Day to everybody, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
All right. Bye, everybody.